I think as an INTJ, we can have difficulty articulating our thoughts exactly the way we want to. And I think we are often kind of slow at doing that and can stumble over finding the right words or simply just finding the right way to say exactly what seems very clear to us in our mind. But then once we hear it out loud, we realize that we're not the best at always communicating, I think, our thoughts properly. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why that might be, and also what we can do about it, and maybe what we can't do about it and just might have to accept as part of ourselves. So I think why articulation might be difficult for us is just the structure of NI, our dominant function. So NI picks up on general patterns of data that we observe in the external world. But yet, I would say most of the time we can actually forget the data itself, or those SE moments in which we're collecting this information and processing it in terms of patterns and concepts. So we can have a very vague idea of what the connection to reality of our thoughts actually is. And then I think because of that we can struggle to kind of put like a framework or basis around it so that other people who are not privy to our internal thoughts and internal constructs can grasp onto it in a way that they would understand it. I think another part of this is that perhaps just in terms of learning definitions of words, I feel like that is something an SI user might be more adept at, in that they have this internal storage of sensory factual information. So they might have this internal storage of each word and its very specific, precise meaning. Whereas NI just might be like, oh yeah, this word is generally used in this context, so I kind of know it roughly means this, but it, you know, maybe there's slight deviations where it could mean this and that, and these are kind of slightly different things, but actually it's an important distinction that NI might not really grasp. I know that there have been words that I've wanted to incorporate into my vocabulary, and every time I come across it I like look up the definition and look up how it's used and try to like remember this, and then of course it just doesn't stick. The next time I come across it I'm like, oh, again I don't remember that definition. So I know sometimes I think I can be slow to speak, and this is I think generally a trademark of INTJs and INFJs. So I know I can be slow to speak because I know there's a word, there's a perfect word that I want to use in order to convey something, and for whatever reason on that specific moment that word is just not coming up to me. And like maybe it's not even like a very difficult word, where it's something that would normally be part of my vocabulary, but for some reason, maybe more so when I'm kind of getting tired or stressed or something, I start like losing whatever sort of SI, the very, you know, minute amount of SI that just I guess makes everyone human. I start losing that. So I'm curious if other INTJs can relate to just not always being able to grasp the precise word that they want to use at the time that they want to use it. I think another reason is that sometimes when we can be asked a very specific question, yeah, we don't have that internal storage of sensory type data that can maybe supply a very specific answer. Or sometimes when you're asked a specific question, it feels like you have to integrate 2 or 3 different parts of your NI web and kind of weave it together. And so sometimes perhaps it can take kind of a lot of backtracking and like explaining the basis for this concept and the basis for that concept, and then explaining why maybe when merged together they might create this new kind of interaction that maybe explains a question. So sometimes I find that I just have to let myself backtrack a lot, and I think maybe initially I would feel awkward of like, oh, I can't just people ask me like a really obvious question and they probably just expect a very simple obvious answer, and I need to kind of go back in all my theoretical models and concepts, but yeah, just I guess having confidence in the way your mind processes information and knowing there's nothing you can do about that, and if you need to kind of go way back to the point where maybe to the other person they might not even see how it's relevant at first, you know, let yourself do that. Also, I think perhaps this is more specific to NI and in conjunction with TE as well, but sometimes I find that my opinion on some sort of particular matter, I just have this very kind of, my sort of understanding of a certain topic might be kind of just boiled down to the essentials, the way NI kind of tends to just want to find like the one truth in anything. And so sometimes sometimes what I have to say on a particular topic might just be like a couple sentences. And I think maybe with TI wants to understand the entire logical framework behind something, so that might add perhaps a little bit more substance behind it. But with TE, it's like we're just looking for that, we're often looking at the outcome. So sometimes NI can just have a very simplified version of an idea and then only look at the outcome of some sort of logical situation. And that can make us kind of very brief sometimes. And that's another thing I think I felt kind of awkward about, or self-conscious, that I only had a few sentences to say on this topic. But I mean, one way is just to, you know, kind of feel okay with yourself in that sense. But if you wanted to expand upon that, I find thinking about concrete SE examples and how that would enact in the real world can kind of help fill it out. And perhaps this isn't really important in terms of like, you know, social interactions, but maybe in like professional spheres or like, you know, academics or something where you have to do a presentation or have a meeting with someone. Then I think bringing it back to real life examples to kind of illustrate what you mean will help fill it out more, and I think it'll help ground it in a way that other people can kind of understand what you're saying. It might not be so kind of abstract and cryptic in an NI way that only the NI user themselves understands. I know I do this a lot, and I think even watching our YouTube channel I've noticed that this is a bad habit of mine, that I start a sentence and then go into like almost the last word, and then I can't find that last word to finish it off. And so I just completely start a new sentence in order to reword it. Or sometimes I just like leave it hanging. I think just being conscious of that can help, but if you really feel like, you know, you're at that point where you're just lost in thought and you're looking for a way to finish the sentence, and you boxed yourself into this grammatical structure that you just can't figure out, then yeah, just start a new sentence and it'll be fine. And NI simply takes time to process information. I guess when we're dealing with the real world in like real time, and taking things in an SE way, I would say usually, unless it's already a very strong part of our NI constructs, we might not see how what we're experiencing in real time fits in. I think we have to then kind of go back, or even sometimes I think it happens kind of even on a subconscious level, where we just kind of sort that SE experiences into those patterns, our NI patterns. So then sometimes I think that makes us really bad at responding to what is happening in the right here and right now. So I think when it's appropriate, maybe with like, you know, closer friends or in work situations or whatever, I guess people that you could get back to, just tell them that, you know, that you want to finish this conversation, but you just maybe need some more time. And I think just kind of having confidence and knowing that that's how your mind works, as long as you don't kind of feel guilty about it or anything, then I think people should kind of respect that. Yeah, so I think knowing which situations you might not be able to just have a very thorough conversation on in the moment, and but you genuinely want to, I don't think there's any harm in just saying, yeah, I find this interesting, but let me get back to you on that. Now this is something where Calypso and I have talked about the difference before, maybe not on this channel, that as an INFP with her NESI, her thoughts themselves are quite actually language based. Like her thought processes use language, I guess, in order to construct her thoughts. So that's something perhaps we would talk about at a later point. But I'm just curious if other INTJs also experience this. That often the way your mind works, you can kind of see like abstract shapes and forms in your head that represent your kind of mental concepts. And you just kind of intuitively know what those forms mean, but then you have to have that sort of buffering process of like knowing what those visual landscapes in your mind mean and then translating it into like a grammatical sentence to convey that meaning. So I think that might be another thing, another reason why INTJs might struggle with articulation. But yeah, I guess everyone's minds are so different, so I'm not sure if I can necessarily attribute that to being INTJ. So I'd really love to hear if you guys agree with that, and or just with any of the points that I talked about in this video. Yeah, generally, do you feel like it maybe takes you a little bit longer to speak than some other personality types? And have you just sort of become accustomed to that and grown comfortable with yourself, or is there anything that you found that helps? Yeah, let me know. Sort of for the logical result or how something would enact in the world and then what would happen. So I guess we're just kind of where we say this, could you just, yeah.